I wasn't supposed to be there that late. The job should have ended an hour ago, but her kitchen faucet wouldn't stop leaking, and I couldn't leave it like that. That's what I told myself, at least. Truth is, I didn't mind staying. She leaned against the counter, arms folded loosely, watching me work. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence, punctuated by the metallic clink of my wrench. Every now and then, I'd glance up, pretending it was just to check if the water had stopped dripping. But my eyes always lingered longer than they should. Her name was Clara, mid-40s, lived alone 2 doors down from me. I'd only spoken to her in passing before. Polite nods, a smile across the driveway, a quiet good morning. I never thought much of it. But now, standing in her kitchen with the dim yellow light spilling across her face, I couldn't think of anything else. "Do you always fix things for your neighbors?" she asked, voice steady but curious. I smirked, tightening the pipe one last time. "Only if they ask nicely." Her lips curved into a half-smile, and for a second the air felt heavier, thicker, as if we were sharing something unspoken. I wiped my hands on a rag, suddenly aware of how close we were. No more than a few feet apart. "You didn't have to stay this long," she said softly. "I know." I met her gaze. "But I wanted to." Her eyes dropped to the counter, almost as if she regretted opening the door to that kind of honesty. A silence stretched between us, long enough for me to hear the faint ticking of the kitchen clock. When she finally spoke again, her voice was lower, quieter. "This stays between us." I should have laughed, brushed it off, said she had nothing to worry about. Instead, the words slipped out before I could stop them. Where else would it go? Her shoulders stiffened, like I'd pulled a thread she'd kept tightly wound for years. For a moment I thought she might ask me to leave. Instead, she reached for the faucet, turned the handle, and watched the water flow clean and steady. "Looks like you fixed it," she whispered. I should have gathered my tools and walked out. That would have been the sensible thing. But the room felt too quiet, the distance between us too fragile to break. She leaned slightly closer, her perfume drifting in the air. Faint, floral. Something that didn't belong in a neighbor's kitchen, but in a memory I'd never had. "You know," I started, my voice unsteady, "I shouldn't be doing this." Her eyes flicked up to mine, sharp but not angry. More like she was waiting for me to finish, to admit something neither of us had said out loud. "Neither should I," she replied. The words landed like a match in dry grass. Small, dangerous, impossible to ignore. My hand brushed against hers as I reached to turn off the faucet. The contact was nothing, a second at most, but it felt like the whole room shifted. She didn't pull away. Instead, she let the silence hang, her fingers still resting near mine. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound, and suddenly I hated it for breaking the spell. Finally, she whispered, almost too quiet to hear, "Then what happens next?" And for the first time that night, I didn't have an answer. It should have ended there, the fixed faucet, the polite thank you, me walking out into the night with my toolbox. But it didn't. Instead, I found myself still standing in her kitchen, staring at the way the light hit the side of her face. A woman who had lived through more years than me, carried them with the kind of grace that made her presence feel heavier, more certain, dangerous even. Clara broke the silence first. "You shouldn't be here this late," she said, though her tone was softer than the words. It could look wrong." I nodded, but my feet didn't move. "Maybe, but you asked for help, and I came." Her eyes lingered on mine, like she wanted to argue but couldn't. She shifted her weight, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. I noticed the faint lines near her eyes, the kind you don't see until you're close enough. I shouldn't have been noticing. I shouldn't have been thinking about how beautiful they were. "You know, I just got out of something," she said suddenly. That stopped me. Her voice was fragile in a way I hadn't heard before. Not the confident, collected tone she usually carried when passing me in the driveway. This was different, cracked at the edges, almost like a confession. I didn't, I admitted quietly. She gave a small, humorless laugh. Most people don't. But I'm not exactly a secret-keeping type, am I? I wanted to ask more, to push gently at whatever wound she was hinting at. But I held back. Instead, I studied her hands. One rested on the counter, fingers tapping absent-mindedly, betraying a nervous energy that her face tried to hide. My own thoughts tangled. She was older, she was vulnerable, and yet here I was, unable to step away. Every small thing about her pulled me in deeper. The slight shake in her hand when she reached for her glass, the way she avoided my eyes when she admitted things that mattered, the faint scent of her perfume clinging to the warm air of the room. Clara, I started, then stopped. I didn't even know what I was about to say. She looked at me expectantly, and the pause stretched too long, so I filled it with the only thing I could. I just don't think I've ever talked to you like this before. Her lips pressed together. She seemed to weigh my words carefully before answering. That's because I never let you. There it was, the wall she'd built, the one that kept this moment from tipping into something it shouldn't. But her voice didn't sound like she wanted it to stay that way. She stepped closer, slow, measured. Her hand brushed my arm. A touch so light I could have convinced myself I imagined it. But I didn't. Her next words landed softly, almost like a dare. Stay a little longer. And just like that, the line between what I should do and what I wanted blurred beyond recognition. I told myself I'd only stay a few more minutes. Long enough to be polite, long enough to not make her request seem like anything more than neighborly company. But the longer I lingered, the harder it became to believe my own excuses. We sat at her kitchen table, two untouched glasses of water between us. She leaned back in her chair, her eyes fixed on me in a way that made my skin feel too tight. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. You don't talk much about yourself, she said, her tone casual but her gaze sharp. I shrugged, forcing a smile. Not much to say. Her eyebrow lifted. There's always something to say. I felt her studying me, and against my better judgment, I let her see more than I meant to. I don't usually let people in. The words slipped out before I could stop them. And just like that, I'd exposed more than I intended. Clara tilted her head, almost tender. Maybe that's why you're still here. Her words hit deeper than they should have. I shifted in my seat, fingers drumming the table, trying to ground myself. But then she reached across, lightly brushing her hand against mine. A small gesture, but it carried weight, too much weight. The sound of my phone vibrating on the counter broke the spell. The shrill buzz filled the quiet room. I stood quickly, almost grateful for the interruption. It's late, I said, fumbling for an excuse as I silenced the call without looking at who it was. I should probably… Don't, she interrupted, her voice firmer now. Please, not yet. The way she said it, not commanding but vulnerable, rooted me in place. My pulse hammered, torn between wanting to escape and wanting to give in. I turned back to her, and for a moment I saw something raw flicker across her face. Loneliness, maybe, or the shadow of whatever heartbreak she hadn't named earlier. She rose slowly, closing the space between us. You know, she said quietly, this is exactly the kind of thing I told myself I wouldn't do. I swallowed hard, every nerve screaming to step back. Clara. But then her hand grazed my arm, deliberate this time, her touch lingering. My breath caught, the air between us too thick to pretend anymore. And yet, before either of us could say what we were both thinking, there was a sharp knock at the door. Her body tensed. We froze, the weight of the moment suspended in the air. The knock came again, louder this time. She looked at me, eyes wide, caught between panic and something else. Something unspoken. Neither of us moved. And in that silence, in that suspended heartbeat, I realized we were already closer to the edge than either of us wanted to admit. The knock at the door faded into silence. Whoever it was had given up, but the echo of it still pulsed between us. Clara hadn't moved. Neither had I. Finally, she exhaled, a shaky breath that betrayed the composure she fought to keep. She turned away, pressing her hand against the counter, as if she needed something solid to hold her up. "You should go," she said, her voice low. I should have agreed. Should have gathered my things, walked out, let the night swallow whatever this was before it became something neither of us could undo. But I didn't move. "You don't want me to," I said quietly. Her shoulders stiffened. For a long moment she didn't answer. Then she turned, eyes locking with mine, sharp and unflinching. "You think you know what I want?" The question cut deep, but there was no anger in it. Only exhaustion. And something else. Something fragile I hadn't seen in her before. I took a step closer, slow, cautious. "I don't know," I admitted, "but I know what I want." Her lips parted, like she was about to say something, but she stopped herself. She shook her head, muttering under her breath, "God, this is wrong." "I know," I whispered. Silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. I could hear the faint buzz of the refrigerator again, the tick of the clock. Every sound felt too loud. Finally, she spoke, and her voice cracked. "Do you have any idea what this would mean for me? After everything. After him." So there it was, the breakup she had only hinted at. Her guard wavered, the loneliness behind her words spilling out despite her efforts to hold it back. I didn't think. I just stepped closer, close enough to see the shimmer in her eyes. "I'm not him," I said softly. The words hung there raw, exposed. I could see her chest rise and fall, too quickly. She laughed bitterly, though it sounded more like a sob. "And you think that makes it easier?" I wanted to tell her yes. I wanted to tell her it didn't matter. But all I managed was, "It makes it real." Her hand twitched, almost like she was about to reach for me. But she stopped midway, curling her fingers into a fist at her side. "You're too young," she whispered, her voice breaking on the words. "Maybe," I said, swallowing hard, "but you still asked me to stay." Her eyes widened, startled by the bluntness of it. For a second, she looked at me as if seeing me for the first time, really seeing me. The distance between us was nothing now, just a breath, just a choice. And then came the silence. Heavy, loaded, dangerous. She didn't look away. Neither did I. When she finally spoke, it was barely a whisper, but it shattered everything. "What if I don't want you to leave?" Her words. "What if I don't want you to leave?" Were still hanging between us when my phone buzzed again. This time, she glanced at it, her expression darkening. "Someone's waiting for you," she said, her tone sharp, almost defensive. "It's just my sister," I said quickly. "She worries when I'm out late." Clara froze. "Your sister?" I nodded, confused at her sudden change. "Yeah, why?" She stepped back, her face shifting in a way I couldn't read, somewhere between disbelief and recognition. For a long moment, she just stared at me, and I felt the ground tilt beneath my feet. "Your last name," she said finally. "It's Reyes, isn't it?" "Yeah," I said, hesitant. Her hand went to her mouth, as though piecing together a puzzle she didn't want to solve. "I knew your mother. Years ago. We worked together. She used to bring you around sometimes. You were just a boy." The words hit me like cold water. A past I didn't remember. A connection I hadn't known existed. I shook my head slowly. I don't remember that." "You wouldn't," she said softly, lowering her hand. "You were too young." The silence that followed was different now, heavier, complicated. I tried to steady my breathing, but the weight of it pressed down on both of us. "So this," I started, then stopped. "This wasn't supposed to happen," she finished for me. Her voice was trembling, but her eyes weren't letting me go. I swallowed hard. Does it change what just happened? What we just said? Her jaw tightened. It should. I moved closer, reckless now. But does it? For the first time, she looked away, pressing her hand against the table to steady herself. God, I don't know, she whispered. I told myself I'd never cross a line like this again. And now, knowing this, knowing you're her son. The words caught in her throat. I reached out without thinking, my hand covering hers on the table. I'm not a child anymore, Clara. I'm standing here, choosing this. She finally looked up, and there it was again, that flicker of longing she tried so hard to hide. You don't understand the danger of this, she said. Then explain it to me. I pressed, but she didn't. She just stared at me, her breathing uneven, as if the truth itself was too heavy to speak aloud. And then, just when I thought the silence would choke us both, her phone rang. The screen lit up, casting a glow across her face. She didn't answer, but I saw the name flash before she turned it over, face down. I didn't recognize it, but the way her hand trembled told me everything I needed to know. Clara, I said, my voice tight. Who was that? She hesitated too long, and in that pause, I realized the real twist wasn't just our past. It was whatever secret she was still keeping now. The unanswered call left the room heavier than before. Clara stared at the dark screen, her hand still pressed over the phone as if it might spring back to life. I waited, my chest tight, but she didn't move. Finally, I broke the silence. You're hiding something. Her laugh was sharp, almost bitter. Aren't we both? The words stung because they were true. I'd hidden how badly I wanted her. How much I'd been circling this line I wasn't supposed to cross. And she had a whole world locked behind her eyes, one I only caught glimpses of. Clara, I said softly. Whatever that was, whoever that was, it doesn't change this. Not for me. Her eyes snapped up, raw, unsettled. It should. God, don't you see how impossible this is? She cut herself off, pressing her palms against the table, grounding herself. You're too young. And I'm too broken. Something in me cracked hearing her say that. Then let me be the one who doesn't leave. Just this once. Her breath hitched. She closed her eyes for a long moment, as if weighing every scar, every rule she had ever clung to. When she opened them again, there was no wall left, just exhaustion, and something like surrender. I ruined things before, she whispered. I hurt someone who trusted me, and I swore I'd never let anyone close enough again. I stepped closer, carefully, like any sudden movement might make her vanish. Then don't call this ruin. Call it starting over. The silence that followed was different, softer, less suffocating. She searched my face, looking for something to break her resolve, maybe hoping she'd find nothing. But I didn't look away. Her hand trembled as she reached for me, fingertips brushing my arm before curling into the fabric of my sleeve. It was such a small gesture, but it undid me. I shouldn't, she whispered. Neither should I answered. Her laugh was wet, shaky, half a sob. God, you make it sound so simple. It is, I said. It's only complicated if we let it be. She shook her head, but her grip on me didn't loosen. And if it ends the way everything else has for me, then at least we won't wonder what we could have been, I said, voice low. That was it, the break in the dam. Her hand slid down to mine, fingers weaving hesitantly, like she was testing if I'd pull away. I didn't. For a long moment, we stood in that quiet kitchen, hands clasped, neither of us daring to move further. It wasn't a kiss, it wasn't an embrace, but it was everything, a confession without words. And when she finally whispered, "Stay," it wasn't a plea or a command. It was a choice, one I was ready to make. I stayed. The word felt simple, but it carried weight. It wasn't just about not leaving her kitchen that night. It was about choosing something neither of us thought we deserved. Clara's hand stayed in mine, steady now, as if letting go would undo everything we had just admitted. We didn't rush into anything. We didn't need to. There was no dramatic kiss, no movie-perfect embrace. Just two people standing too close in a quiet room, acknowledging what had been circling between us for weeks, maybe longer. Later, we sat again at the table, the untouched glasses of water finally in our hands. The air was lighter, though we both knew the complications hadn't vanished. She spoke first. "I kept telling myself I couldn't let this happen," she said, staring at her glass. "That it would break me again. But tonight," she stopped, searching for the right words. "Tonight I realized I've been broken because I never let anyone stay. I let her words settle. Then I admitted something I hadn't planned to share. I've spent most of my life feeling like I was watching it happen from the outside, like I wasn't worth being chosen. And then you asked me to stay." Her eyes lifted to mine, softer than I'd ever seen them. "Maybe we both needed the same thing," she whispered. That was the turning point. Not a dramatic declaration of love, not a perfect promise of forever, but a mutual understanding. That regret doesn't always have to rot inside you. That longing doesn't always have to stay unspoken. The phone on her counter stayed silent. Whatever secrets she carried, whatever shadows followed her, they weren't stronger than what was here now. Not tonight. When I finally left, hours later, long past midnight, there was no fear, no shame in it. Just her at the doorway, her hand lingering in mine until the last possible second. "You'll come back," she said softly. It wasn't a question. I nodded. "I will." And I meant it. Looking back, that night wasn't about crossing a forbidden line. It was about two people seeing each other clearly, stripped of the stories they told themselves about why they couldn't, or shouldn't, or didn't deserve more. Clara wasn't just the woman next door anymore. And I wasn't just the young man who fixed her sink. We were something messier, riskier, but real. And maybe that's the point. Sometimes what we need isn't perfect or safe or easy. Sometimes it's just someone who doesn't leave when they could.